will discuss through Ametora, or Japanese menswear inspired by American tradition and other facets of Japanese culture. We are truly delighted to have you with us today, whether you're a scholar, a student, or simply passionate about Japanese studies. So, let's make the most of this opportunity to connect, learn, and grow together. But before that, we would also like to extend our gratitude to our media partners, Whiteboard Journal and Business Launch Journal, for supporting today's event. Without further ado, let us begin today's session. Before we proceed to the main events, let us first welcome Vesa-san as the founder and director of the Kaijin Labs to deliver his opening remarks. Vesa-san, the floor is yours.
Oh,
Okay, thank you, Alia. Hello, good morning in Jakarta and good afternoon in Tokyo. My name is Pesa and I'm the founder and director of Kaijin Labs, short for Kajian Indonesia Jepang Interdiscipliner or Interdisciplinary Indonesia Japan Studies. As the name suggests, this platform aims to connect Indonesia and Japan from an interdisciplinary perspective. Today, I would like to appreciate everyone who has joined us for our first event, Japanoramic Volume 1, Culture Drift, Ametora, and How Trends Spread. Japanoramic is a program that studies Japan from a panoramic lens ranging from art, architecture, fashion, and beyond. I would like to I would also like to thank our partner, the Center for Japanese Studies, Universitas Indonesia, and of course our media partners, Whiteboard Journal and Business Launch Journal. And let me also greet our speakers. David, how are you today? I've read Ametora and I really enjoyed it. It gave me a lot of inspiration for today's theme. It's such an honor to have you here with us. Aldrie Sensei, so glad you could join us as well. Your perspective from Indonesia will surely enrich our discussion. So once again, thank you very much and I hope you enjoy the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Vesa-san, for your thoughtful remarks. Next, we have Himawan Pratama Sensei with us as the head of the Center for Japanese Studies. Let us welcome Himawan Sensei to deliver his opening remarks. Himawan Sensei, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Alia. Hi. Wait. Okay. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Minasan, gozaimasu. As mentioned, this event is a collaboration between the Center for Japanese Studies, Universitas Indonesia, and Kaijin Labs. On behalf of the Center for Japanese Studies, Universitas Indonesia, I am honored to welcome you to the first edition of our new lecture series, Japanoramic. With this series, we aim to present a wide-angle view of Japanese culture, its movements, its shifts, and its influence beyond borders. This event also marks an exciting initiative to critically explore various aspects of Japanese culture in a broader sense. For this, I would like to sincerely thank and congratulate Mr. Vesa Husnayovari for initiating the Japanoramic series. Today's theme, Culture Drift, Ametora, and How Trends Spread, invites us to reflect on the fascinating ways in which culture travels, transforms, and inspires new forms of creativity. Culture is not static, it drifts across time and space, carried by trends that shape identities, industries, and generations. We are delighted to have with us two distinguished speakers. First, Mr. W. David Marx, whose works such as Ametora and Status and Culture have illuminated how trends emerge and spread within and beyond Japan. And second, Mr. Aldrie Drajat, lecturer at the Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Indonesia, who will offer valuable perspectives on these dynamics from our local academic context. I hope today's session will spark insightful discussions and inspire us all to think more deeply about how cultural flows connect us in this increasingly global age. Finally, I would also like to extend our gratitude to our media partners, Whiteboard Journal and Business Lounge Journal, for their support in helping us share this initiative with a wider audience. Thank you very much for being here with us. I wish you an engaging and enriching session. Thank you. Terima kasih. Arigatou gozaimasu.
Thank you, Himawan Sensei, for your remarks. And now, before we begin with today's presentation, let us first take a moment to get to know the institution behind this event. We will now present a short profile video from the Center for Japanese Studies, Universitas Indonesia, which has played an important role in advancing Japanese studies here in Indonesia. Let us watch together.
Minasan konnichiwa. Hello everyone. Welcome to the Center for Japanese Studies, or in Indonesian, Pusat Studi Jepang at Universitas Indonesia. Since our founding in 1995, we have been committed to deepening the mutual understanding between Indonesia and Japan through research, academic exchange, and collaborative programs. Today, with a renewed vision, we focused on three main pillars: academic activities, cultural interactions, and community services. With this broader mission, we aim to foster not only academic connections between Indonesia and Japan, but also wider cultural exchanges with communities beyond by sharing our passion for Japanese studies. We warmly invite you to join us on this journey through meaningful collaboration and shared commitment to cross-cultural understanding. Let's work together to build a more connected future. 一緒に頑張りましょう。
Since its founding in 1995, STUE has played a significant role in strengthening academic and cultural cooperation between Indonesia and Japan. In late 2023, we will align our visions and missions to better reflect Universitas Indonesia goals and broaden our role in engaging with communities. Our vision is to be leading, professional, and independent research institution built on three core pillars: academics, cultural interactions, and community engagement. These three pillars are implemented through a variety of programs and events, organized directly by PSUE or in collaborations with strategic partners. One of our flagship programs is Kutu Buku, a book discussion series that fosters critical engagement with Japan-related academic and cultural groups. In the realms of cultural interactions, we organize YYJ Culture, an event that celebrates Japanese pop culture, and the music and culture seminar, which explores intersections between Japanese and Indonesian musical traditions. We work closely with the Embassy of Japan in Indonesia to present the ambassadorial lecture featuring the Japanese ambassador as keynote speaker, and the Max Scholarship Seminar, which provides valuable information about studying in Japan. In collaboration with the Japan Foundation, we hold the Japanese Studies Research Workshop and Seminar and the second International Conference of New Frontiers in Japanese Studies. Additionally, we also host one of the sessions of Japan Scope, a public lecture series on Japanese studies by the Japan Foundation Jakarta. Together with the Japan Foundations and the Indonesian Associations for Japanese Studies, or ASJI, we also co-host the ASJI International Symposium and Seminar. With the Japan International Cooperation Agency, or JICA, and the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia, we launched the Modernizations of Japan lecture series, while our partnership with JASO allow us to serve a certified testing center for the examinations for Japanese university admissions for international students, or AJU. With Asia to Japan, we implement the fast-over Japanese language and career training program, supporting students' professional development for careers in Japan. And in collaboration with Tsuji Culinary School and Akamonkai Japanese Language School, we host the Japanese Business and Culture Seminar, which introduce practical insights into Japanese corporate and culinary culture. One of our greatest resources is the PSJUI Library, with the collections in Japanese, English, and Indonesian, including books, journals, and digital archives. Our library connects communities to world-class resources. These collections come from JICA, Japan Foundations, Toyo Keizai, Daido Life Foundation, the Jakarta Japan Club, the Red Japan Projects, and individual donors. Our library is more than a space. It is a bridge between cultures. As part of our commitment to community engagement, PSJUI is making its facilities accessible not only to the university community, but also to the general public. These spaces are open for various academic, cultural, and collaborative activities, allowing more people to engage directly with our programs and resources. Thank you for your continued support. Together, let us strengthen our collaborations and build a future where academic and cultural ties between Indonesia and Japan grow ever deeper.
Thank you. We hope the video gave you a clearer picture of the strong foundation and vision that support today's seminar. Now, let us move on to the core of our event. For our first session, let us welcome our distinguished speaker, Aldrie Alman Drajat Sensei. Aldrie Alman Drajat Sensei, or also known as Aldrie Sensei, is a lecturer at the Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia and a PhD candidate at Kobe University, Japan. His dissertation explores queer migration and digital citizenship through an autoethnographic approach. In addition to teaching, Aldrie Sensei actively researched queer communities in Asia and digital culture, particularly online gaming using ethnographic methods. For today's seminar, Aldrie Sensei will deliver a presentation on consuming odorless Asian culture in Indonesia. Today's event will also be more engaging with an interactive discussion session. Therefore, should you have any question or thoughts, please feel free to share them during the Q&A session. Without further ado, let us welcome Aldrie Sensei as our first speaker. Aldrie Sensei, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you, Alia, and hello, everyone. And I will share my screen first. Okay. So I will be presenting consuming odorless culture in Indonesia, rethinking Asia's position in globalization. It's actually very basic, and I will use a cultural studies scholar concept, Koichi Iwabuchi, that he coined a term culturally odorlessness, and I will see how it connects with the consumption of Japanese popular culture in Indonesia. And I hope I can deliver everything less than 30 minutes so we can have more discussion time. So to question the consumption of Japanese popular culture in Indonesia, we have to identify the presence of Japan in our everyday life. Well, in Indonesia, we know that we are really familiar with Japanese products in Indonesia. Or I may say, maybe it's safe to say that nobody in their house that has no Japanese appliance at all. And Japanese food business in the cities also flourished. Either the imported one or the ones that run by Indonesian businessmen. And also Japanese popular culture events also flourished in Indonesia. Even in Universitas Indonesia, we have some big events about Japan. And contents in the internet that use Japan-related skits, memes, or educational program also popular because Japanese images in Indonesia is that good. But even though we have this good Japanese image in our everyday life, nobody will talk bad about Japan these days, except maybe the Japanese students or the lecturers. But history said the otherwise. We did have not really positive relation with Japan. Well, we had this malaria incident, internationally known as malaria incident. In Indonesia, we know it as Malapetaka 15 Januari, occurred in 1974, that sparked by tensions over foreign investment that shows the disparity of wages between the Japanese worker and Indonesian worker who work in the factory, for example. Well, and it also linked with dissatisfaction with Suharto's increasingly authoritarian rule. And as a symbolic trigger, the visit of Prime Minister Kakuei Tanaka at the time to Jakarta that provoked university students' speculation of economic dependence of Japan. But although the demonstration against Tanaka began peacefully, it escalated into riots where Japanese cars and businesses are targeted. This historical event implies resentment toward foreign domination, especially Japanese economic presence. And I just got informed by my friend from international relations program. He said that in 1974, only 3 people who admitted into Japanese studies program in Universitas Indonesia. And that is affected by the sentiment towards Japan. So following the, sorry, following the incident, well, in Japan shift their power from economic to soft power. And the Japan Foundation Jakarta, established in 1974 following malaria incident, to familiarize Indonesian people with Japanese cultural stuff, such as language, and popular culture and cultural workshops. And also the Japan Foundation often grant us students, Japanese studies students, Japanese studies learner, Japanese language teacher, fund to study in Japan, join the training program to apply the Japanese method into their teachings and how we understand more about Japanese culture. So that's the institutionalization of the familiarization of Japanese culture. And also in early 1990s, we are introduced of Fund Global Cool Japan through Cool Japan strategy initiated by Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And these are the example of the early animations that Indonesians, especially millennials, watch in our television back in 90s in RCTI and Indosiar, Indonesia's broadcast company. And Doraemon, Chibi Maruko-chan, and we have Paman, we have Berusayu Nobara or Rose of Versailles stream in our television. And every Sunday, we would see Japanese animation, even though in Indonesian dub, we recognize it as a foreign Japanese animation. So before 90s, the foreign popular culture that we consumed in common way is Western centered popular culture, well, mostly from the United States. So, but the Japanese popular culture became more common to Indonesian youth. So when I was in elementary school, I already familiar with Japanese animations, and then well, based on my experience, I listen to Western musics and also watch anime. So at that time, music is like the big thing, and uh, music from the United States were so popular. I remember I listened to Britney Spears and Westlife a lot. And then, uh, but we also have that Japanese, rock band, for example. We know Lark and Seal, etc. But we can identify that, oh, this Lark and Seal and Utada Hikaru, for example, they are foreign music that we can enjoy, but they are less relatable in terms of language because Indonesian language is more closer to Anglo-Saxon in terms of word and also grammar. Uh, we are familiar with English, but we are not familiar with Japanese. But even so, we could accept Japanese music, even though we don't know the meaning of the songs. And because it was so common, we can say that globalization in Indonesia is no longer Western centered. And as I said before, Koichi Wabuchi coined a concept, culturally odorless, and it explained the popular culture uh, imported into Indonesia as one of the strategies to normalize consumption of Japanese product in Asian countries, including Indonesia. And Japanese popular culture, not only in Indonesia, also in Southeast Asia, commonly is very welcome, and we consume it not passively but also actively. So you will see how Indonesian people later do like hijab cosplay and then write comic books with Japanese style. Sorry. So because the familiarity with Japanese animation in 2008 is the 50 years of Japan-Indonesia diplomatic relationship. And in June at that year, Doraemon is officially appointed as animation ambassador of Japan for Indonesia. And in September 2008, we had the commemoration in JCC, Jakarta. I was there as a a freshman, and then Doraemon was there. The was the kigurumi, the stuffed animal. And then he became the official mascot for Indonesia and Japan relationship. So here are the odorless animation. For example, we know Sailor Moon as our childhood animation. So, so what is odorless in the Sailor Moon? Okay, let me explain a bit from this picture. Well, Sailor Moon and her Sailor Scouts friends are supposed to be Japanese, and they are still in middle school, junior high school, and then they are all Japanese, and it's impossible to think that Japanese student would have hair like this. Well, this is very generalistic, but um, well, blonde hair and then like blue hair is really unthinkable for Japanese middle school students at that time. But somehow it will become relatable to global audience, especially when it's imported to the United States, for example. And then they changed the nicknames, and then the blonde hair somehow make the characters in Sailor Moon became more familiar with American audiences, of course, with the English dub. And then this is my childhood favorite, Digimon Adventure. It also tells the story about Japanese elementary school students. And then we can see the variety of hair color here. There are blonde kids and also red-haired kids, and it's really unthinkable for Japanese elementary school at that time. Well, blue is the strangest. So it's like really, what do they wanna make from this kind of characterization? Sorry. And this is the most commonly given as an example in cultural odorlessness discourse, which is Pokemon. And then, for example, the protagonist, Satoshi in Japanese, when it's translated into English, his name changed to Ash instead of Satoshi. And then we have the girl protagonist, Kasumi, and then she's translated to Misty in English version. But this kind of translation is easier to relate by the global audience because of the appearance, the what do you call it? The presentation is not really Japanese. And then because of the easy to accept Japanese popular culture, of course, in Indonesia too, Japanese popular culture and its representation seem to be easy to accept. And then this is the picture from Gelar Jepang, which is the biggest Japanese festival in Indonesia, and held by Universitas Indonesia Japanese Studies student. And also, this is Komifuro. Komifuro is initiated and held annually by my friend, actually. He's also a graduate from Japanese Studies, Universitas Indonesia. Uh, it began with a really small scale of exhibition of comic books, but later it became a very big event. So it detached itself from Gelar Jepang to independent event, and it's held annually. And we can see the hijab cosplay. Hijab cosplay is not a new thing in Indonesia. It's not a recent thing. We have hijab cosplay since 2000s, maybe the second half of 2000 to 2000s decade. And then there are some research about it, and some of the cosplayers said that Japanese popular culture like anime is easier to adapt because it doesn't show values that clash with Muslim values. So it's really easy to adapt. And then, of course, comic books. Here are some examples of comics written by Indonesians. comic writers. And if you look inside this is anthology, but if you look inside, there are lots of titles and story written in Japanese style, from the drawing style and also the characterization. Well, the characterization of the characters in the comics is really will remind you to the characterization in Japanese anime. For example, um, we will have the tsundere girl, or we will have, the cool, aloof, favorite boy in school, and something like that. And also we see this, the right one is the adaptation of wayang in Indonesia's traditional Javanese mythology, and it's drew in Japanese anime style. Not only youth culture, but also in music, Japanese aesthetics was also popularized. For example, on the left, we have Agnes Monica. Agnes Monica now is more known as Agnes Mo, but before she changed her persona into Agnes Mo, she was famous as Agnes Monica. And uh, one of her characteristic is her usage of Japanese fashion, such as the hair and then the clothes. She adapted the Harajuku style into her music videos because she's Chinese Indonesian, and later revealed that she also has like some Japanese descent. And then somehow the Japanese style fit her image. And then she exploited it into her own style. So that's Agnes Monica. But not only her, we also have Ratu, the one on the right. Ratu is the two vocal group, consists of Maya Ahmad and Pinkan Mambo, before she sells donut. Well, Pinkan Mambo and Maya Ahmad also adapted Japanese Harajuku style because it's a cool style at the and many people didn't have anything against the Japanese bashed at that time by Indonesian religious um, what's Ormas, social organization. And food that we can see in many malls right now. Ramen, yeah, ramen as a and it's really Indonesian so only in three tool to for the hello sorry
Hello, Residency. Yes.
hello Where was I?
Uh, yeah, you you got out.
Yeah, yes, I think I got some.
Uh, Probably somewhere before this one. Yeah, I think around this part. You were talking about ramen.
Oh yes. Yeah, so oh my God, I forgot. Sorry. Let me just turn off my video so my connection will be better. Okay, so sushi and ramen are one of those Japanese food uh you know liked by Indonesian society. So Indonesian business owner, they make this restaurant and then they are so popular. But not only business and also festivals and musics which can be categorized in informal area. Even in formal diplomacy, we can see how the image of Kawaii Japan is utilized to make the image of Japan through the ambassador. So we have here, if anybody remembers Ishii Masafumi, who served as ambassador of Japan for Indonesia um, from 2017 to 2020. He always posted in the embassy's official Instagram account, eating Indonesian food and do these kawaii or just a really hip style. And then he even got he's known as the a duta besar gemes or really 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 kawaii ambassador. And this way, we can see how in Japan really try to make the image of the harmless country for Indonesia with the kawaiiness and also the cultural strategy. And if anybody familiar with this person, she's Nakagawa Haruka. She once active in AKB48, Japan's biggest idol group, but she didn't get much popularity in Japan in AKB. And then she decided to move to JKT48 to Jakarta. And then she became popular here in Jakarta, not only as a JKT48 members, but after she graduated from JKT48, she tried to enter the Indonesia entertainment as a talent. And then she became famous because she has a funny uh, what do you call it, characteristic. And then because of her high engagement with Indonesian people on her social media, she is recognized by the Japanese government. And then she even appointed as one of the cultural ambassador alongside Hiroaki Kato that we can see on the picture on the down right, where they met Tenno Heika or the Emperor of Japan when they visited Indonesia. So we can see now that how the cultural, the informal diplomacy can also affect the formal diplomacy here between Japan and Indonesia. And that really tells us how trend really play a big part in our society on how we perceive Japan as a country. So to summarize, well, Indonesia had a history of anti-Japan sentiment that leads Japan to use cultural approach as their nation branding. And odorless Japanese products are normalized in Indonesians' everyday life, especially in urban settings. And popular Japaneseness has become a part of youth culture in Indonesia and inspired business and even formal diplomacy. The but is the trendy Japanese phenomenon shows the effectiveness of cultural diplomacy in Indonesia, but at the same time, it simplifies the discourse of Japanese culture that leads to essentialization or generalization of cultural identity by Indonesian people towards Japanese society in general. Okay, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Aldrie Sensei, for the insightful and informative lecture. The insights shared by the Aldrie Sensei earlier provide us with much to reflect upon and to discuss further. With that, we will now like to begin the Q&A session. For those who wish to ask a question, please raise your hand through the feature in Zoom or kindly type your questions in the chat box. Like Gita-san, those.
Okay. Aldrie Sensei, thank you so much for your insightful presentation. I really enjoyed it. And what I want to ask is the current phenomenon in internet in Indonesia. There is a phenomenon that is called a performative male phenomenon, which is a group of male that is consuming like feminist books, consuming matcha, and has a certain style. And many of this performative male takes like Japanese literature, like Murakami books or Meiko Kawakami books for their performativeness, and they are acknowledging that these cultures, these books came from Japanese writers. So is it still an odorless culture if they acknowledge that these cultures are from Japan and they use it intentionally for aesthetics? Thank you.
Thank you, Gita, for the questions. Yeah, I think a lot about how the Japanese, culture or popular culture, including matcha, has become, a complementary things to construct that performative male that you said earlier. Well, but if you look at how how we see Japan in gender perspective, Japan became the feminine country after the World War II because the United States made the constitution of pacifist country. And then also there are some research actually that shows how kimono became one of the cultural signifier to construct the image of feminine Japan because it also associates with the beauty of Japanese women, the beauty of Japanese nature, and that kind of soft, harmful image is what popular in a global audience. So I think why it became the tool to construct the performative male identity, I think that's that. And regarding, is it still odorless? Um, I think not really because you don't have to adopt odorless thing to your to your you know to yourself to construct you as a progressive being. But the one that Iwabuchi said as odorless is those anime who that the names change into English name, for example. So it's like masked by more globalized, codes such as the more Americanized name, for example. But if we see at Murakami Haruki novels, for example, there are no Japanese name translated into more foreign name. But regarding Murakami, I know I'm not really reading much of Japanese literary works, especially the contemporary ones. But if you read Murakami, he refers so much to Western literary works and also Western musics. So I think that kind of more globalized atmosphere shown in Murakami works can be that odorlessness that can be adopted by not only performative males but also Indonesians who enjoy world literature. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much, Aldrie Sensei.
Thank you so much, Kita-san, for the question. Is there anyone else who wish to ask a question? Okay. Yasa-san.
Okay, Aldrie Sensei. Many experts say is that cool Japan has failed in the face of Hallyu and other aspects of Korean pop culture. But when I look at Japanese pop culture, I still see that very distinct Japanese aesthetics. But unlike Korea, which feels rather odorless, do you think Japanese culture will also become more odorless in the future when they are facing the invasion of Korean pop culture? Thank you.
Invasion of popular Korean pop culture, you mean like what, for example?
Like K-pop in the global market.
Also, you mean that Korean popular culture is more expected by the global market than the Japanese popular culture?
Yes, yes.
Well, I think that's given because based on my research also to Japanese video games community, Japan has this tendency to make their works, including video games and also music video, for example, to be exclusive by the region lock system. And it was very hard to access merchandise and also the popular culture things that we want to buy outside Japan because of that. And I think Korean popular culture, their smart move is to make their popular culture to be more accessible. So I think it's not odorless or full of odor matter anymore. It's about how willing are you to make your contents to be more accessible to global audience. And because I think Korean popular culture also can, collaborate with Western music industry better than Japan. What we can see, right? If we see the popular music such as, Apate that sang by Rose with Bruno Mars, etc. And then it's really used in TikTok, for example. It's really popular. It's a globalized, but in not um in not formal way, if you know what I mean, like the piracy. Well, I don't really, I haven't find any, discourse that includes protests from the Korean side about how much our country or other countries pirate their works. They just like that they are more known than Japanese. While the Japanese always so fixated to the hak cipta chosaken, or the, what do you call it, the the rights of the, the owner rights of the creators, right? I forgot the name in English. Well, I think that's it. It's about accessibility instead of otherless or not otherless. Because if you say the world is still fixated to odorless Japan, we can see the popular anime now, like Kimetsu no Yaiba or Jujutsu Kaisen. They represent, as imagery, in terms of imagery, more accurate to Japanese people. So it's not so it's about accessibility. Okay.
Like Federation is the answer to your is satisfying. All right. Thank you, Fesasan, for the question. And I see there's a question in chat and I will read it out. It's from Diandra. I would like to ask Sensei, considering the rise of Japanese cuisine in Indonesia, people are getting more familiar and comfortable with Japanese food now more than ever. With more access to Japanese food, people have been making fusion cuisine by either changing the main ingredient in the food, for example, onigiri nasi kuning, or mixing two separate foods to be made in the same plate in general. My question is, does this count as odorless Japanese culture with the fact that the uniqueness or purity of Japanese culture is being tampered with, or is it something else entirely?
Yeah, I think it's I think it's odorless. I don't know. It's odorless as a concept is really fluid, and we just can't say um this food is odorless Japanese food. This food is fusion, but well, I remember Suntiang. Suntiang is the it's a restaurant that mix Padang and Japanese food. Well, from the name, we can see the Japanese naming, such as sushi, for example. But the strange thing is, it was like rendang sushi. What is rendang sushi? Japanese people won't be familiar with that. But somehow Indonesian would, okay, maybe it's just like sushi with rendang flavor in it. So rendang sushi is like that, that maki sushi, but instead of fish, they put rendang, the meat inside. And I don't know if your question is odorless or not, then it's not Japanese at all. Well, only the roll is Japanese, but if we talk about roll rice, Korea also has that, right? So I think it's not about purity. I think if you want to make business, then if you only rely on purity, but in cuisine we use authenticity, right? If you only rely to authenticity, maybe it won't reach wider consumer. I don't know. I'm not from business, so yeah, I think that's the answer. So purity is not really something that's been, to be achieved in business in Indonesia.
Right. Thank you, Diandra, for the interesting question. And is there anyone else who wish to ask question for Aldrie Sensei? Reni Sensei,
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation, Aldrie Sensei. I'm still confused actually with the concept of colorless, colorly otherless. I cannot really elaborate my question, but this is about the research that I'm doing. I heard that you said colorly otherless means that Japanese popular culture kind of want to make it more acceptable globally. So it's like there is no like something like pure Japanese or some stuff. It's like there is some universality element
Yeah.
in that.
Yeah.
But how about you explain about this phenomenon? I mean, I'm doing a research about Indonesian writers who are writing about or writing prose short stories that with the Japan as the setting, and then the characters are Japanese. And when I ask and when I ask, can you change the setting? I mean, if the story is still the same, the characteristic are still the same, and then you change the character's name into another country's name, or you change the setting into another country. Can you do that? That's my question. And he said that cannot, because I feel that the character and the setting is fits to Japanese. And when I asked, can you explain what you mean by Japan? And he said that it's the aloofness, it's the individuality. It's just something that I cannot change into another country. I cannot make it. I cannot make the setting into Indonesian and something like that. So, how do you explain this colorless this
Oh.
colorly otherless into that kind of phenomenon? Or I mean, because what I see is actually not otherless or something, because we consume Japanese culture actively, and maybe we create our own imagination of Japanese. So I'm sorry, I cannot elaborate my question, but I would like to hear your opinion.
I think I understand because I read your initial research about that. But yeah, to to correct the name, it's not colorly odorless, it's culturally odorless.
I'm sorry.
Sorry if my pronunciation is not that good, but
No.
culturally odorless. So it's
Culturally otherless. Okay.
So the point of the cultural odorlessness is that the the image of Japan or the Japanese, for example, what I took from Digimon Adventure and anime, the setting is really Tokyo that we can see even now in Odaiba and also Hikarigaoka. But the kids, the characters, it's hard to say that they are Japanese, but somehow it's easier for a Western audience, for example. Okay, let me share it once more. Okay, this anime, right? Uh, well, the place setting is in digital world and also the real world, and they take Tokyo as the real world, but and the architecture is really Tokyo. It's really the same with the Tokyo that we can see right now, but the the imagery of the Japanese kids here uh is unclear. Are they Japanese? We can't say because we already have that the generalized imagery of Japanese people, right? Japanese people should be Asian and this kind of stuff, even though it's not really necessary, but it yeah, that's the point. The imagery, I think the imagery of Japanese people really different than the imagery of the generalized image of Japanese people that a black hair or with thin short and that Asian. But when this anime is translated into English, well, for example, this character in orange, his name is Koshiro, but Koshiro is really a strange name for English speakers, especially in the US. And then they changed Koshiro's name into Easy, and it's easier to say, but the name Easy makes sense because Easy doesn't look Japanese, and also Pokemon. Yeah, I explained earlier, they changed the name and it's understandable. It makes sense because they don't look like Japanese, even though in Japan they use Japanese. So for Japanese audience, they are Japanese kids, but for American audience, for example, they are not Japanese. Maybe they are, something else. Maybe from Indonesians too. When I watch Digimon, I didn't think about Japan at first. I think about the monsters and also the kids with their strange name because apparently in Indonesia they didn't change the name. Koshiro is still Koshiro, and then Takeru is still Takeru instead of TK. Uh, but I think that's also the problem with language because Indonesian pronunciation is closer to Japanese, right? We can say Takeru, we can say Koshiro without problem because in Indonesians, the phonetic is really similar. But for English speaker, the name Takeru and Koshiro don't make sense. So I think that's how the cultural odorlessness is uh, something Japanese that can be changed, but it makes sense. So I don't know in case of your research, uh, is the writer did the writer go to Japan?
No, he cannot speak Japanese. He never been into Japan, but
So
he reads a lot of Japanese literature.
yeah, oh yeah, I think we should know. We should ask from what media did he get the information about Japan or image about Japan? I think that's so important.
Okay. Okay. Maybe this is just my last opinion.
Yeah.
When we say about culturally otherless, sorry,
Other.
about culturally otherless, I'm just wondering whether the intention of this all anime and some stuff with this universality elements is actually to globalize. But when the Japanese means globalize, that means globalize into the American or European rather than Asian, because in Asia we still accept this as Japanese. But that's only my opinion. Thank you. Thank you very much for your
Yeah.
answer.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reni Sensei, for the very interesting questions. Now, is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? If Himawan Sensei, please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Alia. Thank you, Sensei, for the very interesting insights. I have two questions actually. The first one is about the 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 role of non-authoritative agents in the spread of Japanese culture. Uh, I think, as you said, many people have highlighted the role of, for example, diplomatic or government agents in the spread of Japanese popular culture, including in Indonesia. But I think, as you know, uh, the role of those from outside those circles, for example, fan communities, are also significant. Uh, I think we are from the generation that got familiarized with Japanese popular culture through pirated products, and we perhaps uh, were members of those fan communities. So the first question is about the role of non-authoritative agents. What do you think about these people? And then the second one is about uh, the limit of Japanese cultural products globalization. I think we've seen the rise of South Korean popular culture, and at the other side also, for example, the downfall of Indian popular culture in Indonesia, probably Hollywood, American popular culture in Indonesia as well. So, do you see the limit of the spread of Japanese popular culture? Thank you.
Well, for the first question, yeah, the community also play a big role in this diplomacy. So I don't know because I'm not from the embassy and I'm not a representative from the Japan Foundation. But I'm sorry, bad throat. Okay, I think if you work as diplomacy agent, you need to see the community in that society. What kind of communities are there in the society? And then you adjust your policy with what they want because it's diplomacy, right? You have your need, but you also have to adjust with what they need. So, for example, from JKT48, let's say, the one I think researched by your student last semester, where the costumes in JKT48 cannot be revealing the the bodies as revealing as their sister group in Japan, right? And then that kind of sensitivity uh can be fine from the community and should be taken into consideration when you want to make policy uh well either in the formal sectors or in informal sectors. Yeah, I think yeah, it really plays a big role, even more in these days when communities are connected through social media. And also you can see how the style of social media of the Japanese embassy, for example, is more playful than the Japanese embassy in Malaysia, for example. And then yeah, we can see how the Indonesian netizens communicate with the embassy. So I can see how close the relation between the Japanese part of Japanese politics to Indonesia is closer than Indonesia to Korea or China, for example. And that also relates to your second question about the limitation because you mentioned about the downfall of Bollywood in Indonesia, right? Well, Japan, based on my observations on Japanese popular culture, Japan did collaborations with some program, and one of those is Project 48. So Project 48 is how the Japanese, no, sorry, how the Korean agency, an entertainment agency, train AKB48 member to be a better dancer and also singer, as a better performer. And that's initiation from Akimoto Yasushi himself because he saw how the world is leaning more into Korean popular culture because of their spectacular performance, let's say. But there are also communities that will stay in Japanese popular culture because there are Japanese popular culture that cannot be, um, substitute by anything. Like, for example, even though it's not Japanese company, but it's a Chinese company. Uh, let's take Genshin Impact. for as an example. It's Chinese company, it's a Chinese game, but the players, the fans are mostly weebu, right? That anime otaku. They find not they, we, because I'm one of those otaku. We find that Japanese anime characteristic in Genshin Impact. So that's why even though I'm playing Chinese games, I don't feel, you know, foreign at all because oh, I know this kind of characteristics from this anime. I know that characteristic from that anime, for example. And then they even make use more of Japanese voice actors instead of Chinese or English voice actors because they know that the audience, the most of the audience are Japanese popular culture fans. So I think the Japanese popular culture won't die anytime soon if you are worried about the continuity of our study program. I don't think we need to be. I don't think we need to worry about that because there are also in bilateral context too. We have EPA and then yeah, even though it's not everything, I don't support everything from the bilateral programs, but uh, well, Japan as you know as the country either in formal or informal sector will still go on, I think. Yeah. Are you worried about
Thank you,
our
Sensei.
future?
But yeah, your answer probably triggered a
Mm,
further discussion whether we need to identify Japan as Japan in the future,
mm,
or would mm, with the flow of globalization, there will be just culture, no Japanese culture, no Indonesian culture, because there will be blend. I
mhm.
don't know. It's just a
Yeah, I don't have anything to say about that because I when I was in Japan, I don't know, with me being like this because my because my research is about my bodily experience. Well, me being Indonesian with this kind of physical features, well, many times I was taught as Japanese, many times I was taught as Chinese, many times I was taught as Vietnamese, Singaporeans, Philippines even. So maybe in the future there will be something like that when people just don't get fixated with that Japan, like you said again. Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Mawan Sensei, for the question and Aldrie Sensei for the very interesting answers. And actually, that concludes our first session. Now, I would like to proceed to the next session. Once again, thank you for everyone who has been participating in
Thank
the
you.
first session's Q&A. And thank you for Aldrie Sensei for the new insights and a very interesting discussion.
Okay.
And for the
Thank you
next
very
session,
much.
thank you, Aldrie Sensei. And for the next session, we will move on to the media partner session. In this session, our media partner, Business Launch Journal, will be presenting their profile video. Please enjoy the screening.
Belgium is a highly developed economy where we shift more and more from industry.
We have the sustainable, we have something that we call CISP, Sweden-Indonesia Sustainability Partnership.
As for Romania, of course, it is a country far away from Indonesia, but not that different.
What I know, only 10% of visitors in Brazil right now are interested in ecotourism activities.
Volume transaksi kripto di Indonesia itu melebihi 650 triliun.
Filosofi dari brand Alvin ini apa? Kita mau promote Indonesian culture tapi through modern contemporary design.
This is Charles Absen, British Forum 2025. Strategi apa tahun ini, gimana kita survive, apalagi sekarang tahun yang banyak tarik ya.
And I can talk to you about tourism. Our project here in more 2 years.
Thank you for Business Launch Journal for the introduction. And before we move on to the next session, Mr. W. David Marx, may I confirm if you are ready to start your presentation?
Yes, and I need to present, see if I can present the slides, but otherwise it should be good.
All right. Now, let us proceed to the next highlight of today's event. We are honored to welcome Mr. W. David Marx as our next speaker. Mr. W. David Marx is the author of Ametora, the very book that serves as the basis of today's seminar. Mr. W. David Marx is a writer based in Tokyo, Japan. His first book was Ametora, How Japan Saved American Style, A Cultural History of Japanese Menswear, and his latest book is Status and Culture, about how the individual desire for social status explains most cultural phenomenon. His works have also appeared in the New Republic, Fox, and Popeye. We are honored to welcome Mr. W. David Marx, who will be presenting his insight and sharing his expertise with us. And like in the previous session, the presentation will be followed by a Q&A, and we kindly invite participants who wish to further explore the subject matter or the works authored by our speakers to share them during the Q&A session. Without further ado, let us welcome Mr. W. David Marx as our speaker. Mr. David Marx, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And you can see the slides okay? Yeah, and you can hear me okay? Hi everyone, I'm in Tokyo. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm sorry I couldn't get to Indonesia this time. I have visited Indonesia probably 3 or 4 times and really enjoyed it, and always interested to go there and see how things are moving along, because Asian youth culture and consumer culture are growing really rapidly, and if you don't check in once in a while, you miss big trends. Thank you to Aldrie Sensei for a very interesting presentation. I think a lot of those issues about Japanese culture coming into Indonesia, you'll see reflected here in American culture coming into Japanese culture, and these questions of soft power and the role of Japanese and Korean culture on the global stage are very, very important right now. And so I'll do this presentation, and then I'm also happy to answer any questions about generally kind of how Japanese culture and culture from Asia are moving around the globe. I was just in China last week and talked a lot about Labubu, which was a very interesting topic for people in China. And I think it's even more complicated than just kind of the rise of China in cultural production. Anyway, without further ado, so today I'm going to talk about my first book, Ametora, kind of somewhat through the perspective of my second book, Status and Culture. And so this book came out in 2022, and it's trying to find what the universal principles of how cultural change, what those principles are. And, the term culture is quite complicated, and I wanted to try to help define that and really look at what is going on when we say something has become a cultural phenomenon or a trend or a fashion. I've got a new book coming out in November. It's called Blank Space, and it's a cultural history of the 21st century. And so this is a very linear history of 2001 to now. The focus, I think, literally, unfortunately, is how I would say it, is too much about the United States, but it is about more or less how culture and cultural values have evolved in the last 25 years, kind of putting the principles of status and culture and taking them into looking at it from a historical perspective. I also do a newsletter called Culture and Owner's Manual that you can subscribe to here, where I pick up topics. I try to write about once every 2 weeks, although these days with the book, it's been a little less. But one of the most important things for me, my background, I studied East Asian studies, so I wasn't necessarily in one discipline, but I was very interested in Japanese culture, and I've been interested in culture my entire life. And I think one of the hard things about culture is there's no standard definition. And there's a whole book that I have that's literally something like 300 different definitions for the word culture. And so if you have culture to mean opera or gamelan, you have culture to mean Pokemon, you have culture to mean hijab, all these different things are all culture. What is it that brings them together? And I think this is a really important place to start if you want to understand how culture works. And what I came down to is that culture is ultimately about arbitrary contingent behaviors, which means human beings can live in this huge different variety of ways. And the culture is describing the ones that are conventional. So in a group where people have decided that they expect each other to do something, and that's really where culture comes from. And ultimately, there are an infinite number of ways that we can live. And so why do we choose one cultural practice over another? And it gets to the idea that there must be a cultural value to that. So the same way that if you have two products and one is cheaper than the other, well, it's cheaper and therefore that's the rationale for buying it. I do believe when we are making choices about how to live, some things we perceive to have more cultural value and some things have less cultural value. And in my first book, I talk a lot about the status value behind that, and that certainly is what I believe is one of the main drivers for that cultural value. But if you're interested in where cultural value comes from and you want to analyze cultural value, fashion is a really, really good field for this. And fashion in general is treated very poorly within the academic world. I think some of it is the bias that academics themselves are very rarely interested in fashion. I think that's changing these days, but it used to be that it was generally a group of very unfashionable people. Then you have fields like science and economics that believe in rationality, and fashion is seen as irrational, which it is not. It's non-rational, but it's not irrational. And so you have all these biases against fashion that it's just kind of a regrettable part of life, but there's no value in studying it. But I believe that it's the purest form of culture in the sense that it's very rarely attached to function or technology. It is almost wholly a set of aesthetics that just float around and change related to social structure rather than to changes in technology. So my first book was published in 2015, Ametora. It's the Japanese abbreviation for American Traditional. And this book came out in 2015. We did a re-edition, which you'll see on the next one, which came out 2 years ago. And then it's been translated in Japanese. It's on its 10th printing in Japanese. It's on a second run in Taiwan. Its fifth printing in Korea, and the one that's the colorful one at the very bottom is from China, and that I think has sold actually the most copies worldwide. And that's because they renamed it to be more about kind of Harajuku streetwear, but it's done very well. So where I like to start this presentation is thinking about Tokyo in 1945. So if you've seen photos of Hiroshima, it looks very similar. People don't understand how much devastation Tokyo had as well from the fire bombings. But this city was completely destroyed by the Americans, the American military. And then, almost only 30 years later, this is a photo of Omotesando, the main fashion center of Japan. It shows a bunch of somewhat delinquent teenagers walking down the street. And if you see what they're dressed in, the main guy in the middle is wearing what's called a souvenir jacket, which was made for U.S. servicemen who lived in Japan. And then you have two men who actually are dressed in 1945 era army uniforms from the American Army. So you have 30 years here where not only is American style kind of big, but specifically these military looks have become valuable to teenagers. And just that 30-year alone brings up a lot of questions about what must have happened. Then you flash forward, another 30 or so years, and Tokyo becomes known around the world for being the most interesting place for youth fashion anywhere in the world. And so these, I think, are photos from Vogue, where they just did street photography of Fashion Week and were really impressed with how people are dressed. And Tokyo's taken on this reputation of being the world's most fashionable city. A lot of Japanese men who, especially if they work in the fashion industry, are kind of heroes of how to dress. People take not only inspiration from their specific outfits, but these men get interviewed quite a bit about the rules of how to dress. The Sartorialist, which is a very big fashion blog, used to feature quite a lot on the very left. Takahiro Kinoshita, who was the editor-in-chief of Popeye magazine, who's now at Fast Retailing, works for Uniqlo. And then Kurino-san here in the middle is a longtime founding member of United Arrows. And so you get a sense that Japanese men are becoming fashion leaders. If you want American vintage clothing, the best place in the world to go is Japan. And so this was from a American blog about 15 years ago. So the best vintage store in the world, and it's mostly American clothing, is not in the United States, it's in Japan. A designer like Hiroki Nakamura of the brand Visvim is quite famous, not just for his Japanese fashion, but the fact that it is related to American traditional wear. If you go to the basement of Beru Berujin in Tokyo, it's a vintage clothing shop. There's just stacks and stacks of vintage Levi's 501s. Some of them are about 10,000 US dollars. This is probably the best and rarest collection of Levi's anywhere in the world, and it's not a museum. You can just walk in and actually shop there. So what's interesting to me is someone who grew up in the United States, especially in the 80s and 90s, Americans had convinced themselves that America was the coolest country in the world and that there really was no rival, that America was the center of rock and roll and blue jeans and later hip hop. In Japan, even if the economy was good, it was not cool. And so kids could think that Nintendo or Super Mario Brothers was fun, but it wasn't really cool in the way that blue jeans or James Dean or the Beatles or or Elvis, I guess, are cool. So the irony here is that Japan became very cool in the 21st century, and American fashion is kind of at the backbone of that. So there's this kind of contradiction. And so what Ametora is about and what I'll talk about today is this story. And I think there's a lot of myths about how American fashion took hold in Japan. And the first myth is that it was organic, in the sense that American soldiers showed up and everyone copied them and then the process started. And that's not really what happened. The second is that because American fashion is so big in Japan, that Japanese people must love America and Americans. I don't think this is true also, that these things get detached from each other, and it's really important to remember that. And then the third, which this point I really care about, is I think there became a reputation that the Japanese are reverent to American culture, that there's this ideal of American culture and they're trying to replicate it and copy it and make sure, almost in this Confucian way, that it's perfectly almost ritualized, and that if this is how Americans did it, this is the way we'll do it. But it's much more complicated than that if you look across the different social classes that have used American fashion in Japan. So the story that I'm going to go through is this sweeping change from Ivy League style to the rise of jeans, to the 70s kind of heavy duty outdoor look, to the Yankee fashion of working class delinquents that was quite different, and then how that all came together as street culture that was then exported to the rest of the world. Okay, so just to give you very quick background on everything before the scope of my book. So, the post-war. So first you have to understand that nobody in the mid-19th century before the Meiji Restoration wore Western clothing at all, that this was a nation that had its own very developed, very sophisticated clothing culture of kimono, lots of different rules in terms of who could wear silk and different patterns. And so Japan had a very sophisticated clothing culture, but it was not related to suiting. The first person to really make the big change to Western clothing was the emperor himself. So he moved from these China-inspired ceremonial garments to looking like a Napoleonic French army general. And then there were many opportunities for the highest level of society in Japan to start dressing up in Western clothing and talk to Western people and dance to Western music. And this was encouraged by the government as a kind of Westernization project. This kind of trickles down from the aristocrats and the very, very wealthy Japanese to finally white-collar businessmen start wearing suits. But it's still class stratified. I mean, I think before the war, more or less, if you are wealthy, you're probably wearing Western clothing, especially for men. Japanese women aren't quite wearing it yet until after the earthquake in 1923. But probably if you're a farmer or someone on one of the lower income strata, you're not wearing white collar clothing yet. At the same time, young people, if they go to an elite university, and the number of people who went to university was quite small before the war, they would wear this. It's called a gakuran or tsume-eri, which is you'll still see today sometimes on private school students, but it's a German-inspired kind of Prussian dark black wool suit, and basically they would buy it once and just wear it for their entire high school. And then when you went to college, you would continue to wear this until you graduated, and then you would get a suit. So everything's kind of a uniform for young people. The first use of Western culture for personal identity or expression really comes from what were called the mobo, the modern boys, and the moga, the modern girls. And the mobo were getting suits kind of based off of Hollywood movies and dressing up not in order to go to work or wear a uniform, but just to look stylish. And they were seen as quite decadent, and there were a lot of crackdowns and police crackdowns of their behavior, especially in the 1930s, as the country became more fascistic. By the time of the war, either you were in a uniform because you were in the armed services, or you wore what were called kokuminfuku, which were civilian uniforms. Women were wearing these farming pants, and quite basically fashion just gets wiped out in Japan during the wartime years. So then American soldiers come, and one of the most important facts that I didn't even know until I did this research, was during the occupation, so in the late 1940s, when Americans were in Japan, most of the Japanese people only saw US soldiers in their uniforms. So you would only see Americans dress casually if you went to the bases, which was a very rare experience for most people. So the idea that a normal Japanese person saw the way an American dressed casually and started copying it was almost impossible, because at first they wouldn't even see somebody wearing civilian clothing, and this was more or less the impression that they got of the U.S. But at the time, Japan was quite poor. I mean, until really the Korean War boom, everyone was very poor, selling off their clothing. But what they did notice is that Americans were very rich and lived a very nice life. And even if they resented the American occupation and resented America as a former enemy, they understood that becoming American was a pathway towards prosperity. And so that really changes people's mindset about Western practices, especially with clothing. This is from the 1950s, but elite Japanese students went back to wearing the gakuran, so nothing changed here. So if you went to a university, this is Ritsumeikan in Kyoto, everybody's wearing a gakuran still in the 1950s. You get the series of movies in the middle 1950s where you start seeing young people wearing Hawaiian shirts and other non-uniforms, and this was seen as a big social problem, and these films were banned. Parents got very upset. And you also had the rise of rockabilly music, in which people were kind of imitating Elvis Presley. And with all of these, anytime young Japanese people were not in uniforms, they were seen as delinquent. And so there's really no youth fashion at this time because companies can't sell clothing to young people because it's considered to be supporting delinquency, which is something that they didn't want to do. So everything really changes with the introduction of Ivy League style in the 1960s. And again, this was not an organic change. This was something that happened quite intentionally. So it all starts with one person. His name is Ishizu Kensuke, and he had been in the city of Tianjin in China, which became a Japanese colony during the war. And he learned how to sell and make clothing. He came back to Japan and he started a brand that was called Van Jacket, and it sold ready-to-wear clothing to wealthy Japanese men. But the problem was that wealthy Japanese men all got their suits tailored. So they would go to a tailor to make their clothing, and Ishizu wanted to make ready-to-wear that was just right off the rack. But that had a very bad reputation, and older men refused to buy what he was making. Women, on the other hand, were making their own dresses, and they're starting to get quite dressed up, but men were still wearing these very boring suits. And so a magazine started in the 50s. It started being called Otoko no Fukushoku, which just means kind of men's clothing. It was a spin-off from Fujin Gaho, the women's magazine. It was trying to help husbands dress better. And Ishizu was one of the founding editors. And this is a really important point, is that the most important brand in post-war Japan, he also was a main editor for the most important first men's fashion magazine. And so the problem, Men's Club came out. It was trying to teach men how to wear ready-to-wear clothing. They would take the magazine back to their tailors and just say, hey, tailor, make me this. So he was really getting nowhere with older men. And the problem he realized is Ishizu wanted to make clothing for young people because he thought that that would be a big market. But young people, again, have this problem that everything they do looks like delinquents, and he didn't know quite what to make. So he took a world tour in 1960, and he ended up at Princeton University. And these are photos that he actually took that he put in Men's Club. And he noticed this style, which we call today Ivy League style. It's khaki and wool pants and navy blazers, tweed jackets, Oxford button-down shirts. And he said, this looks really great. It's very expressive and young people look young, but it also looks nice. It doesn't look like delinquent clothing. So he came back and decided that he would make Ivy League style for Japan. So he hired, he brought in his son, and the person on the very left here is named Toshiyuki Kurosu, is still alive. I saw him last weekend. He's 90 years old, who was the only person in Japan who understood anything about Ivy League style, although they understood very little. They decided, we're going to make Van into an Ivy League fashion brand. And so pretty soon, Van Jacket was pumping out all these copies of garments that you would get at a university shop at Harvard or Princeton or Yale or any of these places. And Ivy League style is starting to spread. It gets its real push with the debut of the magazine Heibon Punch in 1964. And this magazine, as you can see here, people were kind of dressed Ivy on the cover. And a lot of people, Men's Club was a very obscure magazine, but Heibon Punch, within about a year was selling 1 million copies a week. So it was a really big mass media pushing Ivy League style. The kids who are reading Heibon Punch in Tokyo 1964, as they're getting ready for the Olympics, start going to Ginza, the center of the city, buying Ivy League clothing and hanging out. So these kids, who are big readers of Men's Club and Heibon Punch, become known as the Miyuki tribe because they're hanging out on a street called the Miyuki Dori. And you'll see here they're dressed like Americans, so these kind of Madras shirts. For some reason, their pants are very, very short. The one theory is that they didn't know that cotton shrunk, so they would buy short pants and they would get even shorter when they put them in the washing machine. But these kids were some of the first to really be consumers in the sense of to read a magazine, hear that this is the style, and go out and buy it. And the Japanese society didn't quite know what to do with it, and so they arrested a lot of them on a night in September, and this was to clean up the streets for the Olympics. And so the Japanese society still saw this IB movement that was growing, which was just kind of consumer movement, as a social problem. So the people at Van Jacket are kind of freaking out and don't know what to do because everyone's misunderstanding that what they're selling as delinquent products. And so they say we should go back to the campuses on the East Coast and we should photograph and document what the kids are wearing because these are elite Americans, and show people in Japan that, hey, actually, this is elite clothing. And so they go and they make this book called Take Ivy in 1965. This book is still incredibly popular, which we'll talk about later. And this book they release in fall of 1965. They go around the country, do a tour with it. They show the police. They get everybody kind of convinced this is not delinquent clothing. This is how elite Americans are dressing. And it's very wildly successful. Van also is responsible for bringing sneakers to Japan for the first time. And it was also seen as kind of a delinquent act to wear your athletic shoes out on the street, but they helped bring that in. And so by about 1966, if you just walk down the street in Ginza, you would see young people dressed like this. And this is, straight from what Van Jacket was trying to push. And you'll see people with Van Jacket bags. And so, just in a couple of years, you go from really there being no youth fashion to now youth fashion, and the whole crisis of delinquency goes away. So next, jeans kind of takes a very similar path. The first jeans that were sold in Japan were sold in the black markets in Ameota after the war. So often American soldiers would pay Japanese prostitutes not in money, but in clothing because it was actually more valuable. So they would give their old clothing to the prostitutes who would then go to the market and sell it off. And one of the things that they would sell were jeans, and nobody had ever seen them before. They thought they were prison uniforms. They didn't quite know what they were. And so instead of saying jeans, they came up with the word G-pan, which comes from GI, as in the soldier, and pan as in pants. So GI pants, G-pan. And that's still a word that's used today. At the same time, Shirasajiro, who was this, I believe, Cambridge-educated diplomat, one of the most elite men in Japan, he loved jeans, and he got, through his connections, I think, to the US government, someone to give him this nice pair of Levi's. So jeans have this very strange existence where they're very elite and very from the black markets at the same time. But the story of Japan's entry into jeans starts very randomly, honestly, at this very small city called Kojima in Okayama on the inland sea in Japan. It's really only famous for this now. No one else has heard of it. It's kind of close to Naoshima, if you've heard of that island, but that's about it. There was a company called Maruo Hifuku, and they just made kind of industrial work clothing, and they made a lot of school uniforms. So this area, Kojima, was very famous for its school uniforms, which they made out of a cheap polyester called Vinylon. And around, I believe, the early 1960s, Teijin introduced a new fiber called Teteron that was much better. And all the schools said, we want our uniforms made out of Teteron, not Vinylon, but these manufacturers in Kojima couldn't get access to Teteron. They were being locked out by this kind of industrial monopoly. So the business was failing. They didn't know what to do. So they went to Dazaifu Tenmangu, which is a shrine in Kyushu, and they prayed to figure out what should our business do. And the assistants of the founder said, we should make jeans. We've been selling our clothing into Ameoko. The jeans are selling really well, but there's not enough supply. So there should be Japanese jeans. So they start trying to figure out how to make Japanese jeans, and they have to bring all the denim in from the United States because they couldn't make the denim in Japan, and the sewing machines and the thread and everything. And the first pair of Japan-made jeans appear in the 60s from a brand called Canton. This is named after Canton, Georgia. And you'll see from the tags here that it looks, that's just a copy of something I think they got from the United States. So it looks completely American. It says made in USA, even though it's made in Japan. So they're just trying to make it look like an American product. That does not very well, and the department stores refuse to sell it. And so then they made a new brand called Big John that's kind of similar, and it uses cone denim, which is what Levi's always used. But they're selling it, you see here, as kind of Western clothing. I'll skip that. By the late 1960s, you get this backlash to Ivy League fashion, and you get more of a countercultural style that comes in Japan that's copying what's going on in the United States. And so Big John starts changing its advertising to focus more on this longer hair and countercultural feeling. The first major group to wear jeans in Japan were people in the student movement, because jeans were quite durable. And so if you were out battling in the streets, wearing jeans was a great thing to protect your legs. And then where hippie culture came in, you start seeing people wear jeans kind of in imitation of Americans. By the late 60s, you get these Big John ads that are incredibly hippie. They're, maybe even going to the United States to shoot photos and sell these. Politics really dies off in 1972, 1973 in Japan. And so by that point, you get a bunch of hippies who are not particularly countercultural or political, and they're wearing jeans too. And then the jeans maker in Kojima, like Big John, also starts making these bell-bottom jeans, which both genders can wear. So women start wearing jeans as well. So you go from about 2 million pairs sold in 1966 to 45 million pairs in 1973. And then throughout the 1970s, jeans just become really ubiquitous. So Japanese denim makers are making all these jeans. They're importing the denim, but they're very successful in producing it. In 1975, this catalog comes out by the team who later founds Popeye magazine. It's called Made in USA, and on the cover is the Levi's 501. And so suddenly the cool jean was no longer the Japan-made jeans, but this rare kind of American import, the 501. And this whole heavy duty style that comes in the late 70s, which was kind of an outdoor gear style, this uses the 501 straight leg jean, and this becomes kind of the gold standard for jeans in Japan. This is something I just discovered last week. I was on a plane going to Singapore, and they had Gundam, the Japanese anime, and I was watching the first episode of Gundam, and I had never realized that the 3 Zaku fighters who are in the first kind of scene have 3 names: Denimu, which is denim, Jean, which is from jeans, and Srinda, which means like slender, as in like a slender jean fit. So jeans have become so ubiquitous by the 1970s that there's a bunch of jokes in Gundam about denim, which was surprising to me. The one thing Japan wasn't doing was making actual denim, so they were importing it all. But Japan has this incredible legacy of indigo dyeing, so it made sense at some point that they would start doing it. And the first company to do it was Kaihara, which is based in Fukuyama, Hiroshima, a little like close to Okayama, but a little west. And they finally figured out how to replicate the Levi's style denim that was being made in the US. But one thing they were not doing at the time was making what's called selvage denim. So if you see a certain kind of denim, the cloth is on these very narrow looms, and the very edge of it is sewn up, and so it's not just like frayed. And people got so into jeans, they started saying, well, the old jeans had this and the new ones don't have this. And so what is this? This is kind of the mark of really what's special. So they figured out how to start making selvage denim in Japan. And the first pair of selvage denim that was made on these sailcloth looms was called Big John Rare. This sold for about $150. It was about, I think, 3 or 4 times the cost of a normal pair of jeans. And it sold really terribly, and everyone thought it was a really terrible idea to keep making this. Then a new brand in Osaka called Studio Darzan tried the same thing. They were even more expensive, also a complete failure at the time. Levi's Japan makes the first reproduction of early Levi's for the entire company. And this happened in the mid-80s. These were also a failure. And what happens is a bunch of Japanese people start going to the U.S. and buying up all the old denim that nobody wanted in the U.S. and bringing it back. First, they would buy it for $9 and sell it for $50, and then things started escalating in a store like Banana Boat. They would start selling it for about $2,000 a pair. So you can still go there now, and you get these pairs for $3,000 or $4,000 from the 60s. They've never been worn. People get really obsessed with all the different kinds of Levi's that were made and are going out and hunting for it. This is from a guide from the 1990s. But the problem is this obsession drives up the price of the dead stock and old denim. And so now a bunch of companies in the early 90s starts to really figure out how to replicate old denim. And the one that's the first one to be successful is Ebisu, which is still a very popular brand today. And then members of Ebisu quit to form another company called Full Count, which also was very authentic and popular. So we'll catch up back on that later, but you see the development of jeans not just being something that imported, but something that Japanese companies are starting to make the highest quality reproductions of that are even better than Levi's. Now, I think this to me is maybe the most important chapter of Ametora about Yankee culture, because it shows that everything we've talked about so far is really upper middle class professional culture, college students who read magazines and have this anxiety about being properly westernized and properly American. Yankee are a group of people who like American culture but don't necessarily care about any of those things that I just talked about. So Yankee culture starts in Yokosuka, which was where the Navy base was, in a style called Skaman, which ska is from Yokosuka and man is from Mambo. Mambo pants were a kind of delinquent fashion item from the 50s, and every single, basically to say young punk was the word Mambo. So these guys would wear kind of American style to show off being rebellious and a little scary, and that's where that style comes from. The haircut was called the Regent, which is kind of a slick-backed pompadour. This is the first time I've seen the word Yankee in print. It's the late 80s, this is the late 60s, in an article about the Yokosuka Mambo group, and it says Yankee style here, describing his style. Yankee kind of means like a low-class American. It doesn't just mean American, but it means something like uneducated, country type American. Ska-jans are kind of big with the Skaman group. So these are ska from Yokosuka and jan for a jumper or jacket. These were sold to the Navy, the soldiers at the Navy base, and then Japanese delinquents also started wearing them. Carol was a band in the early 1970s who dressed kind of like the Beatles, wearing all leather. The Beatles when they were in Germany. And they loved motorcycles. They were a huge inspiration in the development of these motorcycle gangs that started the Bosozoku. A lot of them you see here are wearing cleaning uniforms because they worked kind of blue-collar labor, but they were very inspired by that Carol look. Now, at the same time that's happening, there was somebody, Yamazaki Masayuki in Tokyo, who was a little bit more in the fashion scene, but loved this kind of the same aesthetics of the Regent hair and leather jackets. And he started a clothing shop called Cream Soda that was really the first youth fashion shop in Harajuku. It really started Harajuku as a youth fashion center. And this shop sold first American vintage, and then they started making reproductions of 50s rock and roll. At the same time, you get a lot of people doing this cosplay of American Army soldiers. So these are from the mid-1970s of just like couples dressed up in soldiers' uniforms. And we get back to this photo, and now you can kind of see where all these different parts come from. So you've got the poodle skirt from Cream Soda, and you've got the souvenir jacket, and you've got the army uniforms. This also develops into the roller tribe, who in the late 70s, early 80s start dancing to rock and roll in Harajuku every weekend. Then from there, kind of Yankee style evolves. So you see here that you still have the leather jackets and the Regent haircut, but it looks less and less American. And then finally, it kind of all gets made fun of in the Namineko, who were these cats who were dressed up like delinquents. And this book sold incredibly well and became a big, huge thing in the 80s. But this kind of culture was called Yankee culture, even though you see here it's like very centered in the gakuran and Japanese iconography of the rising sun flag. Okay, so with the Yankee, more or less, you have this style that evolves. It doesn't matter about reverence at all. It's just kind of about being delinquent and scaring people, scaring mainstream society. At the same time that's happening, Ivy style starts coming back, and so Van Jacket goes bankrupt in 1978, and yet Popeye does a whole issue about Van Jacket right after it goes bankrupt. And so that kind of sparks another wave of interest in Ivy League style. That kind of changes to preppy style. So you see here this men's club. What is a preppy actually comes out before this very, very popular book called The Preppy Handbook comes out in the United States. And so the US and Japan at this point are really experiencing trends in real time, the same as each other. This is the difference between Ivy in the 60s and preppy in the 80s. A little looser and more casual. And then brands like Beams and Ships that are still popular today really get their start in this era by making these sweatshirts that become part of the preppy boom. For a long time, this was all seen as not very valuable outside of Japan, but Japanese fashion starts getting quite popular with Comme des Garçons, Yoji Yamamoto. You had these women who were called the Karasuzoku, the Crow tribe, who were just wearing all black because they wore Yoji and Comme des Garçons, Issey Miyake. And then those designers were getting a lot of respect in Paris, and that came back to Japan, and those designers became very popular in Japan as well. Then you get kind of a different stream coming out of Harajuku of Hiroshi Fujiwara and Nigo. Nigo means number two because he was Hiroshi Fujiwara number two. And they were very interested in British subculture, American hip hop, rock and roll, all sorts of things. And they used their connections with the media to start their own brands and to really push kind of sophisticated Japanese people on new trends. So Nigo founds a brand called Bathing Ape in the early 1990s. You'll see garments like this are very much based off of American casual, and then mixing it with kind of sci-fi aesthetics, skateboarding, things like that. In the early 1990s, in about 2003, Pharrell Williams visits Japan for the first time, meets Nigo. They bring Bathing Ape to Japan, to the United States. And Bathing Ape, which was once kind of this very small brand in Harajuku, becomes one of the biggest brands in the world and is worn by all sorts of celebrities in the United States. Hiroshi Fujiwara starts to be an official consultant for Nike. And so Nike is learning a lot of the techniques about how to sell limited edition garments and clothes from the masters of this in Japan. The book Take Ivy comes out. It gets its first English edition ever in 2010. It sells incredibly well, becomes iconic. All the American brands start referencing this Japanese book as a way to revive their own American brands. So if you go to a Ralph Lauren store, they'll always have a copy of Take Ivy. And then this is Gucci using Skajan on the runway. So this garment that was delinquent Japanese garment is now being sucked into high fashion. And so all these Japanese things kind of, as Japan gets cool, almost everything Japanese kind of gets sucked into Western popular culture and designer fashion and art. if you have a brand like Mr. Porter, so this is an e-commerce site, very high-end e-commerce site for men's clothing, they'll be selling a brand like Beams Plus, which is that takes kind of a revival reproduction angle to Japanese garments. So this is all kind of tied up together too. The best all-American shirt says GQ is Kamakura Shirts. So it's a Japanese company making the best American shirt. So you get these very, very confusing things about what is American and what is Japanese. So that's kind of this arc, and it's only since I published the book in 2015, it's only become more true that Japanese style is really influencing not only the global fashion system, but how Americans even think about America, that it's all kind of filtered through this Japanese lens. I saw a clip of a comedian today who I believe was Vietnamese American, who said, I dress like a white person who dresses like a Japanese person who dresses like a white person. So it's this kind of loop that's quite confusing. But just to, kind of tie this back to the theme of how trends happen, how do things become valuable? The three ingredients that are really important is you need the products, you need something that the trend is anchored around that becomes valuable. You need media to give value and to the object and to tell people about it, and then you need these consumers to want it for some reason. And so everything I've showed you until now, that connection between media, and especially if you read the book, I'm much more specific about it, but the connection between the manufacturers and the media is crucial, that without that, none of these things would have become trends. For producers, and what I'm also trying to show is this is not just reverence for America. We love America, and therefore we have to make American things. These companies decided they could make many different things, but they decided to make American garments because they thought they could make money that way. And especially with Van Jacket, they needed to create a new market, and they believed that American clothing was the way to do that. So profit is still really important, the kind of economic drive. It's not simply cultural some sort of cultural value that makes it happen from the start. On the consumer side, why would you wear American style? So if you think of the very beginning in a world where no one's wearing American style, and if you wear it, you may get arrested, what is the thing that makes a kid want to wear it? Well, the first adopters of American style in Japan were very wealthy. They went to good schools. And so the reason they wore it is because they would have some sort of status distinction over other people if they wore it. I have better taste than you. I have this thing and you don't. That was really where it came from. But if you look at the entire progression, it is people trying to outdo each other about how much they know about America more than somebody else. And that's really, really crucial for the spread. So importation, in a sense, I think we think about soft power and the cross collaboration of cultures and all that. But really an important thing is that things only get imported when consumers in one culture can get status from the importation of that item. So it is not necessarily just that America had some sort of hard power over Japan. It is that the Japanese people who were the first to have some sort of garment, I'm the first to have these Levi's or the first to have these sneakers, could say, therefore I have higher status than you. And so where things fit well into a status system, importation becomes much easier. And I think that's what's fascinating about Korea at the moment, is that Korea went from a country in my lifetime where no one really knew much about the pop culture at all, to now a place where people feel like they're boosting their identity by being fans of K-pop or knowing about K-dramas or K-beauty. So it's not just that Korean beauty products are superior or that Korean dramas are more interesting. It is that you feel a sense of boost to your identity when you're an adopter of Korean products. So there's an aspiration that's part of that. So in some ways, globalization is not just this random chaotic process. It's the flow of culture from one status system to another. But the status aspect of that is really crucial. And I think it's fair to say that in the previous presentation, looking at the move of Japanese culture into Indonesia and also to Singapore and all these other places in Southeast Asia, that there was a status component as well. For Japanese culture is just cool for some reason, and it has a lot to do with this implied status hierarchy of the globe. And then finally, there's this idea of cool Japan. And I think there's a lot of debate about whether Japanese soft power leads to Japanese hard power. I do not think that's true. But there's no question that that Japan becoming cool has been a huge boost to the economy, has been a huge boost to tourism. It has been generally really important for Japan's emergence as one of the most central places for cultural production in the world. But if you go back, and again, I document this better in the book, but the cool Japan products are actually cool in the sense that Japanese denim became aspirational to people who were the most important consumers in the UK or the US. A brand like Bathing Ape was not, it's not a cheap brand. It was a really expensive, hard to acquire brand that became very cool for rappers. And so this aspiration towards Japanese products really is now spread to the aspiration towards the entire country. But it's not just mass adoption, and it has to have some sort of actual cool, distinctive flavor to it. So that's the presentation. Thank you so much for listening. Really happy to answer any questions about anything. And hopefully I'm not too over time, but thank you so much.
Thank you very much for Mr. W. David Marx for the very insightful and informative lecture. And we have gained many valuable lessons and also many questions to reflect on from your presentations. And with that, we will now like to once again begin the Q&A session. For those who wish to ask a question, please raise your hand through the feature in Zoom or kindly type your question in the chat box. Hey, Aidan-san, you may ask your questions.
Good morning, Mr. Marx. First of all, I'm a huge fan of your book, Ametora, and thank you for the presentation. This was very insightful as it recaps like what you've elaborated in the book. And what I wanted to ask is regarding the influence of printed media, like magazines, on trends in the Japanese fashion landscape. I'm aware you recently curated articles for the first English edition of Popeye. And given Popeye's extensive archive dating back to the 60s, what were like the biggest challenges you encountered in selecting the material? And what strategies do you use to keep the content relevant for a contemporary audience? Thank you.
Thank you. So interestingly, I did not choose the articles in the latest Popeye. So they came to me, and we had talked about the issue, and they went through their archive and picked the articles they thought were best for an English audience. I advised on a couple of things, which I don't even think they picked. And that was it. But my challenge was to try to take what they had and make it not just in English, but a little bit more understandable to an audience outside of Japan. But ultimately, it was kind of impossible in the sense that I had this kind of translator's dilemma with the whole issue, because Popeye is a magazine written by very knowledgeable Japanese people about Japan for a Japanese audience. And so if you translate it, it's not just the language, there's all this context about, okay, you live in Tokyo and you know these things, and therefore we're going to give you more information. And so the dilemma is, do you translate what is there? It's like, this is what's written, and now I'm giving you the English, or do you actually rewrite the whole thing to be like, okay, Americans, then like, or anywhere around the world that you don't read Japanese, here's all the background, and here's like a little bit more simplifying. And it ended up we didn't really have the chance to simplify it. So it really is just like the exact text that you see, we translated the English to be exactly that. And so I'm really interested in how people think about it, because it's an opportunity to see what the magazine says, but it is in no way, it wasn't, I don't want to say the word dumbed down, but it wasn't lowered or there wasn't more context provided, or there wasn't simplifications to make sure that audiences not in Japan would understand it. It really is Popeye's voice and Popeye's content. It just happens to be in English. And so I'm interested in seeing how that does, because people love what they love about Popeye, I think, is just that how detailed it is and how specific and new the recommendations are. So they just like, this is a restaurant known to nobody. It only has 6 seats, and that's what you read it for. These really obscure, rare references, and all that is in there. And so, I think while I did not personally edit it in terms of putting together the content, I was just very aware the entire time of what the point of Popeye is, and I think that gave me some kind of perspective on at least trying to keep that tone alive in the writing.
Thank you, Mr. Mark.
Yep.
Thank you, Aidan-san, for the question. And the next one we have Gita-san. Please ask your question.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much, Mr. Marx, for the presentation. I am really interested in studying more about Ametora after hearing about your presentation. What I am curious about is your opinion and your view about the current trends circulating on social media about old money fashion. Like nowadays in TikTok, people tend to dress like similar to the preppy or Ivy side of Ametora, like dressing in knits or Oxford shirts. But at the same time, I also found in the internet the discourse that says when everyone is dressing like old money, it is a sign that the economic state of the world is not going well. So from that, I am questioning if Ametora is a trend or a fashion staple that will endure the future generations or future eras because it is more timeless than timely. And rather than compared to like the 70s hippies or the 80s disco, this preppy or Ivy part of Ametora is more timeless and adaptable to the people worldwide. And even me as a hijabi found that Ametora menswear is easy to incorporate in my daily life because it is modest and easy to find. And do you think that in this pessimistic view of the world that has political and economical issue and competitive job markets and inflation, will that part of Ametora endure in the future? Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Great question. So I'll start with the old money aesthetics. And so also my second book, Status and Culture, I think the almost clearest example in that book of what I'm trying to discuss is the difference between new money aesthetics and old money aesthetics. And I think everyone has a general sense of new money aesthetics is somebody who did not have money, who now has a lot of money, and they immediately go get a red Ferrari or something, or they have a big boat, or they wear head to toe brands with big logos, things like that. So everyone knows that new money is very loud. And then old money is seen as very modest and more subtle, sometimes even kind of shabby and old. Prince Charles is kind of famous because if you look at his suits, there's patches everywhere. So where it gets a hole, they patch it up. They don't just throw away the suit. Or his shoes have patches on them because he's had them for 50 years. So I talk a lot about in Status and Culture the logic between why those things are true. And the basic is just that you're always signaling your status with what you have that someone else doesn't have. And so new money say, I have money and you don't. So I'm going to show you I have a lot of money. And so you buy a bunch of designer goods and sports cars and things. Whereas old money says, yes, we have money, but that's not the only thing you need. You also need time being rich. And so therefore, we're going to not, first of all, counter signal. So if you not drive a Ferrari, we're going to drive an old beat up Mercedes to show you that like what your car is doesn't even matter. And then second, we're going to do all these subtle details that show what a real rich person who's been rich for a long time actually, how they live. And so so that's kind of this dichotomy between these two aesthetics. Now what's interesting is the upper middle class and the people who really are professional class, I think they also hate old money. And they also hate new money because new money have money, but they don't have taste. And I think a lot of professional people have taste, but no money, or just a little money, but not a lot of money. So they hate the new money. And so they also kind of copy old money style. And so and they think they like modesty, they like these anti-new money aesthetics. And so people who are successful professionally have kind of taken these old money aesthetics and it's baked in. And so you are right that American traditional clothing, there's different trends, but it seems to always come back to wearing Oxford cloth shirts and navy blazers and khaki pants. If you go to Uniqlo, it's like that is the basis for that style, right? So like the basis for Western fashion almost goes back to this American traditional style in a way it doesn't go back to hippie style. It doesn't go back to disco. It doesn't go back to like big oversized hip hop or whatever. It's this very elite professional class way of dressing. So so there's all these power dynamics that are related to that. And that's why you keep going back and forth. And then finally, to your point of can you use it as a way to understand the economy? Like I really hate that kind of analysis because I don't think it's true. These things kind of move separately. But I think what they're trying to say is something that people, when they feel that they have a lot of money to burn, can invest in trends. They say, okay, this very strange thing that we all know is strange is in style, so I'm going to spend all this money on it, knowing it could leave later, and then I'll just buy the next thing because I have so much money. There is something conservative about dressing in a way where you know that maybe you could always wear it. So if I get this navy blazer, it's a little expensive, but it's always, for 100 years it's been in style, so I can probably keep wearing it. So I think there is a conservative mindset to it, but also there's it's just more complicated than that. I think there's a lot of reasons to want to dress modestly. And what's interesting and what has a lot to do with power and status and these issues is why is it that the way that American white elites dressed in the 1950s has become like the standard normal way to dress around the world. I mean, I think that's like a great topic for research in itself.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marx.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gita-san, for your question. Now we have Rozan-san. You may ask your question.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Marx, for the presentation, and a big fan of your works. So I was believe that everything is political. Therefore, fashion itself is a political. And given that American cultural imperialism in 1960s, Japan was explicitly designed to avoid communist influence by psychologically avoiding Japanese people from communist influence. Through controlled mass media, and how do we interpret the Ametora phenomenon? Was the Japanese embrace of Ivy style an unintended consequence of American soft power operations? Uh, or should we uh, or should we consider the possibility that the fashion function as a deliberate factor of cultural political influence making?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I would say I don't think there was a conspiracy. So let's say there's a conspiracy side that says the CIA funded Popeye magazine to make Japanese people love America or something like that. Like, and there's people who believe that. So that's not a crazy idea. And the CIA did lots of crazy, terrible things. So it's also not, within it, it's not ridiculous. I did meet the founder of Popeye. He passed away a couple years ago, but I only talked to him for like 2 minutes. But the one thing I asked him is, so did the CIA, actually pay for Popeye? And he's like, no, like silly. So I don't think that happened. But what I think there's more of an indirect influence, which is that in Japan, obviously the U.S. government was strongly aligned. They were there. They were providing support for these magazines, and they were quite. They if someone was interested in the United States, they would make it happen in a way where it's like if you were wanting to make a magazine about the Soviet Union, it was much harder. So I think like that was a big part of it. But then ultimately, and this is what why it was so hard for socialism to spread in a sense is because the status that you would get from consumer culture was so strong. And so the rich Japanese kids just ultimately moved away from communism because communism was very big on Japanese college campuses, but they moved away from it because American style consumer culture, which is so much stronger, and they went that direction. And so it worked, and Americans supported it, and certainly didn't get in the way of that happening. But I think it was still relatively a natural process. I don't think it was that there was a specific plan for that to happen.
Thank you, Mr. Marx.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Rozan-san, for the question. Now we also have Netanya-san. Netanya-san, you may ask your question.
Okay. First of all, I'm a fan of your book about Ametora, and your book is really helped me to write my essay about Japanese preppy style. So my question is, how Japanese fashion magazines like Men's Club and Popeye magazine offers Ametora style as a way of self-expression in clothing to young Japanese men. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think self-expression is really complicated in that, and I think its status and culture kind of deal with this question about self-expression because in most cases, your self-expression is not from scratch, kind of from zero, saying, I'm going to be this person. Everyone's like this, I'm going to be like this. It's usually the way I'm going to express myself is I'm going to be part of this group. And in the case of Japan, I think that these men's club and Heiwan Punch, both very early, and then Popeye too, said there if you're an urban, upwardly mobile, educated, college educated, white collar worker, young person, you have to know about jazz, you have to know how to dress, you have to know where to go on a date, you have to buy the right things. And so they kind of gave a sense of like, this is what a sophisticated man is like. Here's the kind of movies you watch. Here's the kind of music you listen to. And Ivy League style was a part of that at the very beginning. And then, jeans and other items kind of went along. And so it wasn't personal expression in the sense that we think about now, which is like, here's how to, you take this emotion of how you feel and you express it in your canvas of your body and the clothing. Is just more kind of, in order to show that you're a certain level of sophistication, you need to know all this information and you need to buy these products. And I think that's why it's been so successful. I think American magazines, were never that prescriptive. They never said, you must do this. It was much more about the trend this season is red. And so we're going to show you a bunch of red things, and then you yourself are going to think about how to use red in your outfit, but we're not going to tell you how to use it. And I think Japanese magazines were like, do your tie this way, do not do it this way. Wear these kind of pants, don't wear these kind of pants, and much more specific. And so, yeah, I think the question of is self-expression the right way to define that, or is it just more setting a standard for what people in a certain class, how they should behave?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Netanya-san, for the question. And now we have Hassan-san. Hassan-san, you may ask your questions.
You very much, Mr. Lammers. Big fan of your books, of Ametora. I really want to ask something question about the future of other ones say IV or preppy in Japan because recently I just realized there is no how to say men's club and second magazine didn't have any publication recent years and I went to Magnif last February and they decide to close in November. So, is there any future in preppy or IP in Japan?
Yeah, so you asked very very specific up to date question. So men's club existed for a very long time. and it went out of print, I believe, last year. So, and then Second is still around, and I haven't seen them in a while, but I know they do a lot of IB and Preppy content still. Magnif is definitely open. I was just there, and I think it was just closed maybe when you were there. But in general, I would say the trend at the moment is not Ivy. Maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was kind of there was a Ivy boom. I would say now things are not quite that direction, but it's still the basis. So even if you go to a brand like Callum, which is like a really big silhouettes and sporty, they still do Oxford shirts, they still do khaki pants, they'll still do military things. So or Beams Plus. Beams Plus really moved away from pure Ivy reproduction, but the basis of it is still very much kind of Americana. So I think everybody is advancing where they're taking the original ideas and going in different directions, but the core of it is still the same aesthetics as maybe the way I would explain it.
Still remains in Japan.
Yeah.
That's my question. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Hasan-san. Now we have Randy Sang, and before that, I'm sorry, will be our last question because due to our time limitation, we have to move on to the next session. All right, Randy Sang, you may ask your question.
Okay, hello, Mr. Marx. Okay, I'm also a big fan of your work, and uh, seeing that you have been working on literature, and then you're also recently working on Popeye magazine. Do you think that the Western publication will adopt the same layout as Japanese magazines, or why do you think they don't adapt that? Because I think even if we don't understand any text of the Japanese, people also being interested with what they have, and so I think, what do you think about it? Thank you.
Yeah, so the format of Japanese magazines, if you haven't seen them, is much more like a catalog, lots of little text boxes. And what made translating Popeye really difficult was just how much text was on a single page and how small the text was. But interestingly, there's a couple magazines in the US that already have taken influence from Japan. So one of them was Complex. They were very specifically looking at Japanese magazines from the 90s and setting the content for Complex. And then Monocle magazine, I know when they started, they were looking at old issues of Men's Club. So I think there's been some influence already. It's just not as stark in the sense that American magazines just can't get. I just think the editors don't have that kind of mindset. But the other part of this is, and this is what I really felt with doing the Popeye issue, that Tokyo itself is this city of 40 million people, more or less. There's just so much stuff. There's like, all these neighborhoods that have really important stores, and there's always new stores. And then there's, always this little shop with 5 seats. And so Popeye is this reflection of that mindset of thinking, okay, if we're going to tell the story about this place, we got to cover everything, and we have to cover all these little things. And so if you go to New York, there just isn't as much. If you go to London, there's just not as much stuff as there is in Tokyo. So it's not just a format, it's almost the Japanese consumer culture itself requires this really detailed catalog format in order to think about it. And so I think there has already been some influence. And then, of course, the other thing is, how do you take it online? And there's just something very different about, an Instagram post is just one thing usually. It's like, here's this one item and a little blurb, versus Popeye, which could have 15 items on a single page. And so the internet is also changing this a little bit.
Okay, thank you for the answer, Mr. Marx.
Thank you.
Thank you, Randy-san, for the question, and Mr. W. David Marx for the answers. And due to our time limitation, we will now conclude our last session. And now we would like to proceed to the next session. Once again, thank you for everyone who has been participating in this session's Q&A. And thank you for Mr. W. David Marx for the new insights and very interesting discussions.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sensei. Once again, we want to thank Aldrie Sensei and Mr. W. David Marx for the very insightful and informative topics, and also for all the participants for joining us in the event and the discussions. As we come to the end of today's session, we will now like to move on to the closing remarks. But before that, we kindly invite our participants to join us for a group photo if your camera is available and you are comfortable for turning it on. Alright, we will now start taking the group photo. Please follow my lead. For the first slide, 1, 2, 3. And for the second and the last one, 1, 2, 3. Alright, thank you for your participation in the group photo. And before we officially end today's session, I'd like to share a few brief announcements. First, we warmly invite you to the International Japanese Studies Research Workshop and Symposium 2025, which will take place on October 21st until 22nd, 2025 at the Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Indonesia. Online participation will also be available. We look forward to your attendance. Lastly, on October 23rd, don't miss our upcoming event UI Nichibunken Joint Symposium, Rethinking Cultural Exchange between Southeast Asia and Japan. This event is a collaboration between Center for Japanese Studies Universitas Indonesia, Faculty of Humanities Universitas Indonesia, and the International Research Center for Japanese Studies or Nichibunken. The program will feature a roundtable discussion and interactive discussion session with distinguished speakers. The event will take place at Auditorium Building 4, Faculty of Humanities, Universitas Indonesia. And for those who are interested, you can see the QR code shown on the screen. And last but not least, we would like to once again thank our media partners, Whiteboard Journal and Business Launch Journal, for their kind support of today's seminar. Once again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Miss Alia.
Thank you, Mr. Marx. Thank you, Aldrie Sensei. Alia, all. Thank you. Terima kasih semuanya. You again.